They came promising unity. They left us orbiting in trash. What the galaxy saw as waste, we saw as opportunity. This isn't a story about war. It's a story about what happens when you underestimate the wrong species. Because when humanity couldn't match their power, we built our own from the pieces they threw away. They thought they were burying us beneath their broken inventions. All they really did was hand us the blueprints to our future. The sky dimmed unnaturally as the colossal vessel from beyond the stars eclipsed the sun, casting Earth into a pale shadow. Commander Elias Varn stood alone within the panoramic dome of the orbital outpost Sentinel Reach, his weathered fingers interlocked behind his back. 2 decades adrift among the stars had hardened him, but nothing had braced him for this. First contact was supposed to be a triumph of civilization. Instead, it felt like mockery. "Commander, they're releasing another drop," reported Ensign Kalendros, the green light of the diagnostics array flickering across his youthful face. "That's the third one this cycle." Elias narrowed his gaze as the alien monolith's cargo hatches peeled open with mechanical indifference. A cascade of mangled alloys, shattered hulls, and scorched components spiraled into the void, adding to the derelict graveyard that now orbited their homeworld. His jaw tightened. Half a year ago, the Varelian Accord had arrived in Earth's skies under banners of peace, offering guidance and unity among the stars. But unity had come with a price, and no dignity. "Patch me through to lead Mechanist Sarah Lynn," Elias said, his voice low, eyes locked on the cold ballet of wreckage. "She needs eyes on this." Sarah arrived swiftly, dark strands falling loose from a bun twisted hours ago during another endless systems calibration. Her uniform still smudged with grease. She joined him in silence at the viewport. One glance was enough. "They're not even pretending to respect us anymore," she muttered. "Why would they?" Elias answered, bitterness curling in his throat. "To them, we're barely sentient ground crawlers who just stumbled into orbit. Tossing us their scraps is probably charity in their eyes." Sarah leaned closer, scanning the tumbling remnants. Her engineer's instincts flared. Some of that debris was suspiciously intact. She pulled her data slate from her belt and swept her fingers across the surface, calling up diagnostics. "These energy readings, Elias, this isn't junk." Before he could respond, the station's comms cracked and hissed to life. "Sentinel Reach. This is Oversight Liaison Marak of the Varelian Accord. Confirm receipt, : Elias shared a glance with Sarah, then keyed the comm. "This is Commander Varn." "Proceed, Liaison." The alien's voice oozed patronization, smooth and precise, like a lecture for a slow-learning child. "Today's scheduled tech dispensation is underway. Please instruct your salvage teams to follow protocol when retrieving items. We'd prefer your personnel not injure themselves on devices beyond their species limitations, : Sarah's grip tightened on her slate, the screen audibly creaking. Elias kept his voice steady. "Acknowledged, Liaison. We'll adhere to our rudimentary safety standards." "Excellent. One more thing, Commander. : Marak's tone dipped into condescension so thick it nearly dripped. "Your request for entry-level deflector schematics has been evaluated. Given your planet's developmental status, the Council finds such access premature. Revisit the request in a century or 2, : The signal cut without ceremony. Elias turned. Sarah hadn't moved. She stood transfixed, eyes flicking rapidly across her screen, a flicker of excitement glowing behind her focused expression. "Sarah, what is it?" Her voice was low, deliberate. "I'm thinking they should have double-checked what they were throwing overboard." She pivoted the data slate toward him. "That last drop? It included 3 shield cores. Obsolete by their standards, sure, but intact enough to rebuild. Fully functional if we're careful." Elias felt something stir deep in his chest, something dangerously close to hope. "Can we reach them before Earth's gravity tears them apart?" Sarah was already halfway to the hatch. "Even better." I've been tracking their flight cycles for weeks. They dump waste on repeating vectors and disappear for exactly 43 minutes before the next orbital pass. She glanced back at him, a defiant smirk forming. Plenty of time for our so-called primitive scrappers to sweep the field. And the Accord? They gave us full authorization to collect their refuse, she said, tapping her slate. They just never bothered to define what counts as refuse once it's in our hands. And so it began. In the following weeks, the pattern solidified. The Varelian ships arrived, discharged their heaps of discarded tech, and departed with disinterest. Earth's retrieval craft, officially designated as waste management, moved in. Under Sarah's direction, they developed a sixth sense for spotting high-value components buried in the junk. The Accord's pride worked in humanity's favor. Their inspection units barely skimmed the surface, dismissing every move as desperation-driven salvage by a backward species. What they saw were grateful primitives, scavenging scraps from the table of the enlightened. They never looked deeper. Elias secured a forgotten mining installation buried beneath the Drelvek Range, refitted it into a clandestine facility shielded from orbital surveillance. Sarah handpicked a cadre of scientists, engineers, and technicians, Earth's finest, all of them restless, all of them burning for something more than survival. They gathered in the shadows, drawn by a singular purpose: to prove Earth wasn't a footnote in some cosmic ledger, to turn discarded relics into stepping stones. Piece by piece, they studied the alien tech, not just how it functioned, but how to elevate it. They believe we're slow, Sarah told them at their first assembly, that it'll take us centuries to crack what they've tossed aside. Let's show them what happens when you misjudge the desperate and determined. The breakthrough came exactly 3 months later. Her team had been dissecting a fractured energy barrier unit, one the Accord had deemed unsalvageable. Their systems relied on crystalline lattices to direct charge flow, elegant but volatile. A single crack in a control crystal brought the entire barrier offline. Sarah hunched over the microscope, studying the fracture web. "Gorgeous design," she murmured, "but tragically inefficient. All this energy wasted because their pride refuses to innovate. All that potential gone, unraveled by a single fragile crystal." Kalen Dross, who had joined the covert initiative at Elias's request, looked up from his console. "What if we stopped trying to fix it the way they would?" Elias stepped closer, intrigued. "Explain." "They build like machines think, single solutions, single failures. If something breaks, swap it for the same piece. But we don't have the same parts, so why copy them?" He tapped a few keys, and a blueprint unfurled on the central screen, a branching web of lines and nodes. "We can't duplicate their crystal networks, but we can build our own distribution system based on Earth materials. Copper, silicon, redundancy. Not elegant, but flexible." Sarah's eyes narrowed, following the schematic. Her fingers curled around her tablet as the idea took hold. "Not sleek," she said slowly, "but it doesn't have to be." Elias nodded. "It just has to work." "And it will," Kalen added, "because they'd never expect us to think like this. They can't." That spark ignited the next phase. The underground lab pulsed with life. Sarah's engineers tore down alien devices and rebuilt them from the bones up, swapping intricate foreign systems for rugged human design. Where the Accord had favored flawless form, humanity favored survivability. If it bent, it didn't break. If it cracked, it rerouted. The lab echoed with soldering torches, clattering tools, and the muttered language of problem solvers. Elias watched it all unfold, pride swelling like a tide in his chest. The Accord's obsession with flawlessness had left them blind to a brutal truth. Perfection is brittle. And Earth had learned to adapt. Then came the moment everything changed. The prototype hybrid shield roared to life with a resonant hum, shimmering like heat above a reactor vent. It held steady under sustained power, rougher than its alien counterpart, but far tougher. It flexed under pressure and kept holding. Even better, they could rebuild it from scratch using only earth-forged parts. The chamber exploded with cheers. Sarah stood beside Elias, staring through the glass, face glowing in the artificial light. "This is the first step," she said. "Every discarded fragment they throw at us is another piece of the staircase. They think they're keeping us in chains, but they're building our ladder." Elias's gaze was already drifting upward, beyond the mountain, beyond the clouds. "How long until we start scaling it?" Sarah's grin was razor-sharp. "Give me half a year and a steady stream of their garbage. We'll show the stars what humanity can do with their leftovers." Far above, another Varelian cruiser settled into orbit. Cargo bays already yawning open for the day's delivery. Oversight Liaison Marak watched the human collection crafts flit about below, their crude engines flaring blue-white. His mandibles twitched in idle amusement. Primitive vessels, basic tools, desperate creatures. Had he looked closer, he might have noticed the pattern. They didn't move at random. They moved with purpose. But like the rest of the Accord, he never bothered to look close enough. He saw only what he expected, patterns that matched his worldview. That blind certainty would become the Coalition's most fatal flaw. 3 months into Operation Eschrise, the subterranean forge beneath the Drelvek Mountains surged with relentless momentum. Welders sparked beside alien conduits. Diagnostic drones hovered over hybrid cores. Earthborne tools lay beside scavenged Varelian instruments, blending two worlds on cluttered workbenches. The air thrummed with ion discharge, fresh coffee, and raw anticipation. Sarah stood before a rotating energy schematic, watching the latest prototypes pulse cascade through a web of glowing lines. Next to her, Kalen adjusted modulation variables on his interface, the blue light of the projection dancing across his furrowed brow. "Try rerouting through the tertiary buffer," Sarah suggested. The display shimmered. The waveforms shifted, but then buckled again. Kalen sighed. Still unstable. Their cores were never meant to accept Earth's redundancies. "Then we'll bend them until they do," Sarah replied, her voice like tempered steel. She pulled up the hybrid power matrix, zooming in on the section where Earth-forged filaments had replaced brittle alien crystal work. The Varelians discard anything less than perfect. That's their religion. But us. She tapped the screen. "We evolve." A soft alert chimed as Commander Varn entered, balancing a fresh datapad and 2 steaming mugs. "How's the beast holding up?" he asked, offering Sarah her drink. "Getting stronger by the hour," she said, sipping gratefully. "We solved the energy flow bottleneck by designing parallel failover circuits. Less efficient, but sturdier. When it breaks small." Elias nodded as his eyes swept across the flickering schematic and its adjacent weapon modules. "That's where it gets really interesting," Kalen said, summoning a new projection. The room dimmed as test footage played, a Varelian plasma cannon, classified as scrap, mounted on a reinforced test stand. But instead of the weapon's iconic smooth blue beam, the energy expelled twisted like a ribbon of lightning, flickering through red, violet, and silver in irregular bursts. "We couldn't restore it to spec," Kalen said, "so we didn't try." Sarah continued, "The Coalition designs their arsenal for ideal conditions. Perfect alignment, clean power, flawless timing. Any disruption? Total failure. And their tactics are built on predictability," Kalen added. "Same firing sequences. Same targeting logic. No variation. Why innovate when you dominate?" Sarah smirked. "They've grown complacent. But we haven't," Elias said, stepping closer to the display. "We're building around failure, because we've had to." He tapped the footage. "What am I looking at here?" "A re-engineered plasma dispersion system," Kalen explained. "Not as clean, not as precise, but less prone to catastrophic failure, and harder to track. We're bending the beam, scattering it into chaotic pulses. It hits like hell and dances through most shield harmonics. Elias folded his arms, a slow smile spreading. So instead of chasing their perfection, we embrace chaos, Sarah finished. They all turned toward the shimmering prototype. The coalition had discarded it. Earth had turned it into a weapon. By fusing their discarded tech with ancient Earth guidance arrays, systems pulled from Cold War archives and forgotten silos, they achieved the impossible. Test footage showed the distorted energy beam twist mid-flight, spiraling around a simulated deflector field and slamming into its target from an unexpected angle. Elias gave a low whistle. They'll never see that coming. That's not even the most exciting part, Sarah said, eyes gleaming. Kalen, bring up the frequency modulator. With a few taps, the data display shifted. Dozens of fluctuating waveforms danced across the screen. Virelian shield arrays all operate on fixed frequencies, Sarah explained. Their weapons are calibrated to counter different settings, but the shields themselves? Static. They don't adapt. But we do, Kalen added. Our system can dynamically shift emission frequencies during combat, reacting in real time to whatever we're up against. All using their discarded tech, Elias murmured. How many systems have you repurposed? Sarah's grin was electric. Better if I show you. She led them through a blast-sealed hatch into a vast hangar carved into the bedrock. Spotlights swept across scaffold towers, walkways, and engineering stations. In the center stood something massive, jagged, and defiant. It wasn't sleek. It wasn't beautiful. It was something better, human. A vessel born not of elegance, but necessity. Patchwork armor, mixed alloys, repurposed internals. The lines were angular, the silhouette raw. But it radiated purpose like a drawn blade. We're calling it salvation, Sarah said. Everything here was made from their cast-offs, but rebuilt on our terms. She gestured to the hull, an interlocking honeycomb of layered metals, coalition alloys fused with earth-forged composites. Stronger than their originals, she said. We tested it. It holds. The core? Elias asked. Multi-layer redundancy, Kalen answered. No single failure point. No brittle crystal lattice. Elias's gaze drifted upward to the observation deck taking shape at the apex. And the command center? That's where we break their doctrine completely, Kalen said with a quiet thrill. The Accord's vessels rely almost entirely on AI logic cores, automated responses, preset threat protocols. Efficient, but slow to improvise. This one. Sarah rejoined as she returned. Manual systems across the board. Human eyes, human instincts. Full override access. Adaptation in real time. A nearby technician flagged Sarah down, motioning toward a fluctuating readout. As she moved off, Kalen leaned closer to Elias, voice lowered. Commander, there's something else. You need to see this. He led him to a restricted terminal tucked beneath the observation gantry. With a secure code, he pulled up a decrypted file, the logo of the Virelian Accord flickering briefly before the data appeared. We recovered this from the neural matrix of a junked logic array. It's not just scrap they're tossing onto us. He looked Elias dead in the eye. Some of this tech? It was banned, flagged as unstable, unsafe, too dangerous for their own fleets. Elias's expression darkened. They're not just throwing away their past, they're burying their mistakes, Kalen finished. Too volatile, too adaptable. The Accord feared anything they couldn't script, anything that thought outside the box they designed. But unpredictability was exactly what humanity needed. Elias's mind spun. They've handed us the blueprint for something they'd never have the courage to build. Just then, Sarah returned, her expression sober. There's more, she said, holding out her slate. Scans from the latest debris field. Look at this. The screen displayed a cascade of data. Elias read quickly. Kalen's eyes widened. They're slipping, Sarah said, overconfident. Yesterday, they dumped a nearly operational tactical core because the AI subroutine was flagged as too aggressive. She met Elias's gaze. Can you imagine what we could do with an intelligence that learns in real time, one that adapts mid-conflict? He looked at both of them, his most trusted minds, and saw the same unshakable spark he felt within himself. How soon can we begin full integration? 2 weeks for the basic suite, Sarah replied, already calculating. Another month to weave in the high-risk augmentations. The hardest part will be keeping it all under wraps. Elias didn't blink. Let them inspect. Let them sneer. All they'll see is what they expect to see: damaged parts, clumsy repairs, salvage crews fumbling in the dark. He turned toward the heart of their growing colossus. Their pride is the perfect disguise. What followed blurred into sleepless weeks. Salvation took shape piece by piece. Every shard of alien tech was carefully rebuilt, adapted, disguised. The crew worked in relentless shifts. There was no backup plan, no second try. This was it. And then, too soon, the inspection. The Varelian review ship descended into low orbit. In the main chamber, the hybrid vessel was dismantled just enough to appear benign. Cables hung loose. Hull panels removed. A stage dressed in imperfection. Sarah greeted the inspection party with a controlled smile. She led them through rows of debris piles and deliberately clumsy repairs. Her team had staged everything. Workers fumbling with oversized tools, misaligned conduits, smoke generators set to hiss at just the right moments. The Varelian delegates hardly glanced at the tech. Their focus settled on the makeshift tools, on the malfunctioning interfaces, on a technician struggling, by design, to wire a common coupling. "How quaint," murmured the lead inspector, a tall creature with bioluminescent eye ridges and a voice dipped in disdain. "At least you're making the effort," it continued, "though I doubt much will come of it with such elementary methodology." Sarah gave a respectful nod, masking the fire behind her eyes. "We do what we can, liaison." The inspectors moved on, satisfied in their own superiority. Above them, beyond their notice, the vessel slept in shadows, waiting. Not a derelict, not an experiment, an answer. "Of course, liaison," Sarah replied smoothly, while behind her back, her fingers subtly crossed in a gesture from an ancient Earth superstition, one that once meant "I'm lying through my teeth." Once the inspection vessel cleared orbit, Elias convened his senior team in the command chamber. "They suspect nothing," he said. A ripple of relief passed through the room, quiet smiles, shoulders loosening. "But we're on borrowed time," Elias continued. "Every day we wait increases the risk they see through the illusion. We need to accelerate." "The weapon arrays are prepped for calibration," Kalen reported. "Shield modulation is holding steady at 90%. Hull resilience has officially surpassed Varelian benchmarks, our hybrid platings outperforming their standard armor." Sarah activated the timeline overlay. Dozens of colored paths lit up across the digital display. "We're ready to begin full power integration next week." "But, Commander," she hesitated. "When we activate the main core," she said carefully, "we won't be able to mask the energy footprint. Coalition sensors will pick it up eventually." Elias took a breath, steady and deliberate. He looked at the men and women gathered around him. Scientists with dark circles beneath their eyes, engineers with scorched gloves, techs hunched over consoles for days on end. They were exhausted, but alive with purpose. They had taken the galaxy's unwanted trash, its discarded tech, its forgotten code, its obsolete designs, and forged something impossible. Not just a ship, a declaration, proof that humanity didn't just belong among the stars. They were ready to lead. "Then we make sure we're ready when they do," Elias said, his voice sharp with quiet conviction. "Because when that moment comes," he stepped forward, eyes burning, "the galaxy is going to learn something they never saw coming." He looked to Sarah, to Kalen, to every weary face lit by the glow of their creation. "They'll see our greatest strength isn't our tech," Elias continued. "It's what we do with it, what we've always done. Take the worst they throw at us and turn it into something better." Around the table, heads lifted. Backbones straightened. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a reckoning. The meeting ended not with applause, but with something heavier, sharper, a shared momentum. Above them, through miles of stone and reinforced alloy, the void turned quietly on its axis. Virelian ships cruised past Earth in calm formation, oblivious. They believed Earth was asleep, that humanity was still crawling. But deep beneath their orbit, in the heartbeat of a hidden forge, something new had awakened. A vessel built of broken things, a people forged by struggle, and a storm waiting for its name. Every routine discard, every so-called obsolete module dumped into Earth's orbit, was another silent gift. And piece by piece, those forgotten relics brought humanity closer to unveiling the truth. The galaxy had no idea what it was throwing away. The far side of the moon, never truly dark, only hidden, was the perfect place to build something the Coalition must never see. Commander Varn stood before a reinforced viewport within the Crescent Forge, the lunar construction a ray carved deep into ancient basalt. Beyond the glass, the skeletal frame of Salvation hung suspended in vacuum, encircled by a cloud of repaired drones flitting like silver insects. Earth glowed in the distance, a blue gem swaddled in cloud, fragile and worth every risk. Voltrian core ignition in 5. Came Sarah's voice over comms, cool and focused. All non-critical staff, clear the deck. The swarm scattered, leaving Salvation drifting in silence beneath the hollowed moon. Varn turned and made his way to the command tier, where Sarah and Kalen stood amidst a forest of control panels, faces bathed in shifting light. "How's she holding together?" Varn asked, sliding into place behind them. "Ready to stretch her wings," Sarah replied, fingers sweeping across the interface. "Every joint's been triple-checked. If this works, we'll output more energy than a Virelian warship, with none of the fragility." "Safety nets primed," Kalen added. "Fail-safes armed. Secondary cores online. If it goes sideways, we contain it." Varn nodded once. "Light it up." Sarah inhaled, then keyed the command. Far below, deep within Salvation's armored spine, the hybrid power matrix began to resonate, a hum like no Coalition reactor had ever made. Not the sterile purity of a crystalline pulse, but a layered vibration, thick, complex, alive. "Power climbing," Kalen reported. 20%, 40, 60, he frowned, scanning his console. "Secondary filament surge." "That's expected," Sarah said, knuckles white as she gripped the rail. "No crystals here. The harmonics need time to calibrate. Let it breathe." The hum intensified, rising into a low roar. Outside, arcs of charged plasma snaked along the hull, lightning veins crackling from node to node. The panels lit with warnings, error flags, system alarms. Still, Sarah didn't flinch. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on, girl. Show them who we are." Then, without warning, it happened. The readings leveled. The feedback loop vanished. The jagged pulses of chaotic energy melted into a brilliant field of steady light, azure and radiant, encasing the ship like a second skin. Kalen blinked at the numbers. "Commander, we're pulling 120% over projected maximum." He looked up, a plane on his face. The hybrid reactor isn't just stable. It's outperforming every metric. It's better than what they built. A beat of silence passed, and then the control room erupted. Laughter, cheers, disbelief. Engineers pounded each other on the back. Techs hooped into headsets. It had worked. Against every expectation. They had built a heart from broken pieces, and it was beating stronger than anything the stars had ever known. Inside the command nexus, Commander Varn placed a steady hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You pulled it off." "We pulled it off," she corrected, voice trembling as she blinked back tears. Every engineer, every line of code, every failed trial, every misstep mattered. It all led us here. Their brief celebration was cut short by a sharp proximity alert flashing across the main screen. "Commander," called a tech from the lunar surface relay. Incoming contact. Coalition patrol vessel. Standard recon arc. Right on schedule. Varn's expression hardened. Shut it down. Scramble the masks. Everyone to non-alert stations. As one, the crew moved with rehearsed urgency. The radiant field around Salvation dimmed to nothing, vanishing just as the patrol ship's silhouette passed high above, a cold arc of silver against the void. In the Nexus, displays flicked to cover visuals, meaningless graphs, clunky Earth schematics, and diagnostic chatter that simulated primitive failure. Sarah queued up their decoy program, a crude model pretending to decipher Varelian tech with laughable inefficiency. It screamed hopeless curiosity. The enemy vessel swept past once, then again, then silence. When the proximity alarm faded, everyone exhaled. Too close, Kalen muttered. Too close, echoed Varn. We're running out of time. Sarah, how long until Salvation is fully operational? She tapped through a dozen layered projections on her slate. 14 days to finish weapons integration. Another 7 for full combat diagnostics. She hesitated. But the real test is the crew. Simulations are one thing. Real-world handling of the hybrid interface is something else. Then we drill, Varn said. Again and again, until no one blinks when it counts. He looked around the room, his voice rising. They think we're primitive, too fragile for their technology. Let them believe that. Because we're about to prove that primitive doesn't mean simple. He leaned forward. It means daring to think in ways their sterile logic never could. What followed was relentless. 3 weeks of sweat, repetition, and sleepless resolve. Crews drilled through every conceivable failure cascade, manual overrides, jamming scenarios, energy flux shifts, and improvisation drills. They grew into the ship's unique rhythm, part alien, part human, and wholly unpredictable. Salvation wasn't just a machine. It was a mirror of its makers. Not refined, but resilient. Its weapon arrays were the perfect example. Where the Varelian armaments were bound by formulaic tactics, pattern strikes, and predictable engagements, the hybrid systems aboard Salvation pulsed with something else entirely. Human instinct. Instead of algorithms, decisions came from minds unbound by code. Split-second shifts, feints, flashes of chaos wrapped in strategy. Every attack sequence could pivot mid-flight. Every defense response could rewrite itself in real time. And with every drill, the crew learned something deeper. This wasn't just about survival. This was about showing the galaxy what adaptation truly looked like. In combat simulations, unpredictability proved to be their sharpest blade. Again and again, their hybrid systems outmaneuvered coalition ships with rigid, rule-bound programming. It's the difference between a trained fighter and a machine that's been taught to punch, Kalen explained to the crew during a live drill. Sure, the machine hits harder, maybe even faster, but it can't think. It can't read the room. A human sees the rhythm, learns it, breaks it. That was humanity's edge. Their new defense systems reflected the same philosophy. Instead of relying on a single-layered shield like the coalitions, they had constructed a nested matrix, multiple layers of interlinked energy fields. Some absorbed impact, others redirected. One could even reflect kinetic bursts if timed precisely. It was harder to manage, demanded more from the crew, but it offered freedom, options. The system works because of them, Sarah said during the final run. Coalition ships operate like drones. The crew simply requests, and the AI decides. We're building something that demands intuition, that thrives on it. Commander Varn watched his people move like a single organism, adjusting flux ratios, modulating shield thresholds, tracking erratic enemy behaviors in training sims. Each individual had been handpicked, not only for their expertise, but for how they thought. These weren't just soldiers or specialists. They were innovators. And what they were building wasn't meant to imitate coalition design. It was something else entirely. The final component was installed in the 11th hour of construction. The salvaged combat AI, the one the Varelians had labeled unstable. In its original form, the system had been rejected for its unpredictability. Too autonomous. Too curious. But Sarah's team had reworked it from the ground up. The intelligence didn't issue commands or control the ship. It acted as an advisor, a tactical companion. It calculated probabilities, analyzed opponent behavior, and offered options. The final decisions always remained with the crew. As the last diagnostics completed, Sarah smiled at the readouts. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "They discarded it because it broke their mold. Just like they underestimated us." Commander Varn gathered the entire crew in the central hangar. Above them, the ship loomed, brutal, angular, stitched together with human hands and alien parts. No elegance, no polish, but it lived. "Take a look," Varn told them, voice resonating in the still air. "This is what they gave us. Scraps, leftovers, refuse. They figured we'd bury it or break trying to understand it." He turned to the crowd, engineers, navigators, tacticians, all staring up at the vessel that had become their obsession. They thought we were beneath them, that we couldn't possibly shape anything useful from their discarded legacy. He raised his hand toward the hybrid ship. But what they forgot, what they never understood, is that humanity thrives on broken things. We learn, we rebuild, and we create something new. He looked to Sarah. "Status." She stepped forward. "Final checks complete, Commander. Nova's Edge is operational." Varn's gaze swept his crew, ready, determined, unshaken. "Then let's show them what junkyard dreams are made of. Then let's make our entrance," Varn said. "It's time the stars see what they tried to throw away." Far above them, a coalition salvage drone coasted silently across the void, releasing another cloud of outdated tech, just more cosmic litter, forgotten before it even fell. But soon, the Accord would realize their true mistake wasn't the scraps they tossed into Earth's orbit. It was thinking humanity couldn't turn broken pieces into a blade. The emergency klaxon pierced the forge like lightning through steel. Varn was mid-briefing with his bridge leads when the red lights flared. "Talk to me," he snapped into his comm. Kalen's voice crackled through, tight and urgent. "Distress signal from Sector 9. 3 unidentified vessels attacking a civilian transport. Heavily armed. Outnumbered." Varn was already running, Sarah at his side. "Coalition response time. Nearest patrols 20 minutes out," Kalen answered grimly. "The transport won't make 5. "Then we don't wait." Varn slapped the ship-wide comm. "All units, battle stations. This is a live engagement. Repeat, live." The crew responded like clockwork. No panic, just purpose. Varn dropped into the command chair as lights flickered across the Nova's Edge bridge. Sarah slid into position beside him in engineering. Tactical feeds lit up the room. "Launch bay clear," announced the deck officer. Above them, lunar rock split apart as the concealed doors to the surface yawned wide. "Arm weapons," Varn ordered. "Targeting online," came the reply. "Hybrid arrays reading hot." "Engineering standing by," Sarah called. "Reactor stable. Shields humming like a war drum." Varn took a steady breath. "Launch." The ship surged skyward, rising from the moon's shadow with the quiet fury of a ghost long buried. Its mismatched hull gleamed with converted energy. From above, it didn't look like a warship. It looked like a patchwork of memories. But it moved like a predator. As they broke the horizon, long-range sensors locked onto the chaos beyond. The Coalition transport was spinning, hull fractured and ablaze. The raider vessels danced around it like vultures, firing in calculated bursts. "Ite?" Varn asked. 2 minutes if we push the drive," Kalen said. "Their scanners haven't pinged us yet. Our hybrid signatures probably scrambling their expectations." Varn allowed himself a grim smile. Good. Let's greet them properly. Tactical, one warning shot. Let's see what our new teeth can do. Power surged through the ship's experimental weapon array, an amalgam of 3 separate coalition systems, rebuilt and redesigned. The energy built in stages, flowing through alien-converted conduits no original engineer would recognize. Target locked. The weapons officer confirmed. Fire. The cannon roared, but not with the sterile blue of a core tech. The discharge spiraled, violet, red, silver, folding around itself like a living current. It twisted midair, riding gravity in unpredictable arcs. It didn't look like a weapon. It looked like the birth of something new. And when it struck, the lead pirate ship reeled, shields buckling under a force they couldn't explain. Varn sat back, eyes narrowed. Now, he whispered, they see us. The energy beams split mid-flight, forking into jagged tributaries that wove a lattice of crackling force between the pirate vessels. The raiders were forced to scatter, veering off course to avoid the web of death slicing through space. What in the void was that? One of the pirate captains barked over open comms, voice raw with panic. That's not a core tech. This is Commander Varn of the Terran Vanguard, came the cool reply. Disengage and withdraw immediately, or we'll give you a closer look. The only answer was a storm of incoming fire. Dozens of plasma bolts tore through the void, aimed to overwhelm any conventional defense system. But what met the barrage was not standard coalition shielding. The Nova's Edge lit up, its hybrid barrier catching the blast, and doing something far more dangerous. Shield lattice at 115% and climbing, Sarah reported, practically grinning. They're powering us. The energy didn't just dissipate. It fed back into their core systems, amplifying the ship's strength. Return fire, Varn ordered. Time to show them what happens when you mistake innovation for weakness. The ship surged forward, every weapon alive with fury and invention. Unlike coalition vessels, its assault was chaotic, erratic, human. Each shot shifted resonance, tricking enemy shields into collapsing under mismatched frequencies. The targeting AI, guided by human instincts rather than programmed doctrine, struck like a hunter reading its prey. The first pirate ship faltered in moments, engines gutted by a bolt that bent mid-trajectory and slid past its aft defenses. The second veered off, only to run headlong into another of the Edge's snaring energy webs. The third, clearly the leader, opened a direct channel. Coalition vessel, we are seizing the transport. Any attempt to interfere, and their passengers get vented into space. Not today, Varn muttered. He turned to Sarah. That trick we rehearsed, the one that shouldn't work, she was already activating the command string. Ready when you are, Commander. Varn tapped the comm again. All hands brace. Initiating gambit sequence. Tactical, feed everything into the core. The Nova's Edge trembled as its hybrid reactor pushed beyond safe thresholds. Energy surged through its conduits like molten light. A standard coalition ship would have torn itself apart under the load. But this was something else. Something built for chaos. The hull shimmered, glowing brighter until... Now. Varn barked. The ship released a targeted pulse, a silent shockwave, not to destroy, but to disrupt. A bloom of exotic energy raced outward, washing over the final pirate ship. Every system aboard the raider scrambled. Navigation flickered, targeting screens blanked. Shield modulations collapsed into nonsense. It shouldn't have been possible, which was exactly why it worked. With a sudden pivot, the Edge fired 3 precise pulses: engines, weapons, comms, clean hits. The final pirate ship spun silently, dead in the void. Varn opened comms again. Civilian transport, this is Nova's Edge. Status. Silence. Then a voice, dazed and breathless. We're still here, but stable. The transport captain finally responded, voice still laced with shock. But what are you? That weapon, those maneuvers, they're impossible. Not impossible, Varn replied quietly, his gaze fixed on the stars ahead. Just human. Before he could say more, a fresh blip flared across their tactical screen. More ships. 3 of them. Sleek, silver-bodied. Coalition warships. Their weapons already priming. The lead vessel hailed them on a secure channel. "Unidentified craft," came the clipped, superior voice of a coalition overseer. "Power down all systems and prepare for boarding. Unauthorized modification of Accord technology is a Class 1 violation." Varn exchanged a look with his bridge crew. Calm. Resolved. This was the moment they'd been building toward. "Coalition Command," he said evenly. "Run your scans again. Every component on this vessel came from your own legal salvage zones. You gave us this technology, we simply reimagined it." "Lies," the commander barked. "Those systems were certified defective, unfit, unusable. Your species lacks the capacity to. That's your flaw," Sarah cut in, rising from her station. Her voice wasn't angry, just honest. "You assume that because you couldn't fix it, no one else could. You toss anything that doesn't meet your expectations. But humans, we build from wreckage, from chaos. That's where we begin." The coalition vessels tightened formation, slowly encircling the Nova's edge. But their systems had already scanned it, and what they'd seen wasn't supposed to be possible. "Careful," Varn warned. "We just protected one of your civilian transports. While your fleet was still en route, we neutralized 3 raiders without a single loss of life. You're welcome, by the way." He paused, voice like steel under velvet. "Or would you prefer to explain to your council why you're threatening the ship that just did your job for you?" The silence that followed was electric. On screen, the coalition commander hesitated. Systems blinked. Calculations ran. Power balances measured. Varn could practically hear the wheels turning. At last, the overseer's voice returned, tighter now, bitter. "This incident will be reported. Your ship violates Accord Directive 19. You have crossed lines not meant to be crossed." "No," Varn said calmly. "We've redrawn the lines. Your rules were meant to keep us waiting, dependent, grateful for scraps. But we've shown you something better." He rose slowly from the command chair. "We took the technology you buried, and we made it sing." The bridge remained quiet as his words hung in the air. "You're not looking at a violation," Sarah added, standing tall beside him. "You're looking at proof that maybe, just maybe, you underestimated the one species that never stops rebuilding itself." Outside, the coalition ships held their positions, still surrounding, but not attacking. Not anymore. They had come expecting a mess of scrap held together by ambition. What they'd found was a revelation, and the stars, once distant and indifferent, now waited to see what Earth would build next. Across the stars, word of the Nova's edge spread like solar fire in dry space. Whispers became reports. Reports became debate. Debate became panic. The Accord's ruling chamber, a spiraling dome of light and stone orbiting the gas giant Varellos, was filled beyond capacity. Delegates from every known species gathered in tense rows, voices rising in disbelief and disbelief alike. At the center of it all stood 3 humans, Varn, Sarah, and Kalen. They felt the weight of every eye in the galaxy, but none of them flinched. "This is a violation of everything we stand for," bellowed the Accord's Grand Fabricator, his robes of status billowing like plasma in a solar flare. "They took our cast-offs and desecrated them. Their vessel is a disgrace, a twisting of our most sacred engineering laws." Sarah stepped forward, calm but resolute. "Or maybe," she said, "we just did something you didn't think was possible. Every element of our vessel came from the ruins you left behind. You discarded the pieces. We connected them." A pause. Then the Council Sovereign, a tall silver-skinned being whose voice echoed like distant thunder, leaned forward from his throne of logic and light. "Demonstrate this vessel. Explain how it functions." Kalen brought the chamber's holograph to life. Blueprints of the Nova's edge shimmered into the air, systems interwoven with strange harmonies of earth metals and discarded accord cores. You built everything to fit a mold, Kalen explained. One way, one function, no deviation. Anything that failed, you tossed it. He zoomed in on the hybrid core. Those fractured crystal grids you deemed unstable? We found their flaws, made them more alive. We layered imperfect fragments together, reinforced them with conductive alloys, and found a rhythm. The flaws didn't break the system, they empowered it. A wave of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Your claims are absurd, the fabricator snapped. Our models prove such systems are unstable. Varn's voice cut through the noise. Your models only predict what you already believe. But the universe doesn't care about your expectations. Our ship works. And more than that, it acted when yours couldn't. His words echoed like a gauntlet thrown. In every corner of the chamber, quiet murmurs stirred. The survivors of the civilian attack had spoken. Their lives had been saved not by the Accord's patrol fleet, but by a ship made of scraps and earthborn courage. This isn't just about a single vessel, Sarah said. She pulled up images from the lunar complex, teams working under rock and shadow, sparks flying as ancient parts were reborn into new machines. You gave us your garbage, she said. We turned it into a future. We didn't mirror your designs, Kalen added. We evolved beyond them. The Sovereign's expression remained unreadable, but the room was no longer laughing. And what precisely would you have us do? The Grand Fabricator sneered. Acknowledge that a species barely out of its gravity has surpassed our most sacred engineering. No, Varn replied, steady and clear. We want you to recognize that different doesn't mean inferior. We're not trying to replace your systems. We're offering something alongside them. Imagine what we could build together if we weren't forced to sift through your discarded failures. A voice rose from the crowd, unexpected, weary, sincere. It was the transport captain, the one Nova's Edge had saved. My vessel held 300 civilians, families, children. The pirates would have slaughtered us. That primitive ship saved our lives. Maybe it's time to rethink what we call advanced. A silence fell, then slowly cracked as others stepped forward. Not just humans, delegates from fringe worlds, minor species long held back by outdated restrictions. One after another, voices joined in, stories of being overlooked, dismissed, forbidden from developing tech beyond what the Accord deemed appropriate. The Nova's Edge hadn't just proved humanity's capabilities. It had exposed the flaws in the very foundation of Accord progress. After hours of impassioned testimony, the Sovereign lifted one silver hand. The chamber dimmed, falling quiet. It seems we did misjudge you, they said at last. And perhaps we've misjudged more than just humanity. Perhaps our wisdom has become rigidity. They turned, addressing Varn and Sarah directly. Captain Varn, lead engineer Sarah, what is it you're proposing? Sarah stepped forward, her voice unwavering. End the tech restrictions. Let humanity take its place as a full member of the Accord, with the right to develop, to collaborate, to lead. The Nova's Edge proves we're ready, and that we can make your technology better. And if we refuse, the fabricator asked, scowling. Kalen smiled faintly. Then we keep building. You already handed us the pieces. The only question is whether we move forward as partners or as competitors. The Sovereign was silent for a long, weighty breath. Then slowly they nodded. The embargo ends. Humanity will be granted full Accord status, with all rights and responsibilities. And they turned to the Grand Fabricator. We will found a new division of the Science Accord, one dedicated to hybrid advancement. Engineer Sarah, would you accept leadership? Sarah's eyes widened. We would be honored, but only if we can include others. Worlds long denied the chance to grow. The Nova's Edge was only possible because we saw potential where others saw waste. The chamber began to shift. Hope rose like light breaking through old clouds. Later, at a high observatory, Varn, Sarah, and Kalen stood at the viewport. Below, ships flowed in and out of the Accord capital. Among them, Nova's Edge. Its unorthodox silhouette stood out boldly among the sleek, uniform vessels. "Hard to believe it started with broken parts," Kalen murmured. "No," Sarah said. "It started with human imagination. The scraps were just waiting for it." Varn pointed to the sky, where new ships were already taking shape, some clearly inspired by Earth. "This is just the beginning," Sarah said, her voice like a promise. Above the lunar horizon, new vessels were already taking shape, sleek forms forged not from cast-offs, but from true collaboration. These weren't stitched together in secret bunkers. They were born from open cooperation, each ship a fusion of coalition elegance and human imagination. They didn't just represent technology. They embodied a shift in thinking, a bridge between what had been and what now could be. The Accord had once thought they were putting Earth in its place by offloading their failures. But instead, they'd handed humanity everything it needed to rise. Nova's Edge hadn't just defended a helpless transport. It had shattered the galaxy's assumptions, redefined what was possible. In the years that followed, the tale of a warship forged from abandoned tech became legend. Retold in dozens of languages, in shadow plays, holos, and star maps, it was remembered as a turning point. But its true legacy wasn't in blueprints or battles. It lay in what it taught the stars themselves. That greatness doesn't always come from perfection. Sometimes it's born in the chaos of trying something new, from seeing possibility where others saw only waste. On the edge of Earth orbit, Captain Varn stood one last time on the bridge of Nova's Edge. The ship creaked faintly around him, not with age, but with memory. Soon it would be docked permanently, preserved as a symbol of what had once been impossible. He let his fingers trace the back of the captain's chair. Once it had been just another salvage seat, bolted down by urgency and hope. Now it was part of history. "Final launch window in 20, came a familiar voice. Sarah stepped onto the bridge beside him, dressed now in the deep blue of the Accord Science Council, her new rank stitched into her collar. But her eyes were the same, still fierce, still forward-looking. "You ready?" she asked. "Yeah," Varn said softly, still taking it in. They still don't fully understand how we got it all to work." Sarah laughed. "Because they're still thinking like the Accord. They need everything to be symmetrical, ordered, elegant." She stepped to the console, running her fingers over its mismatched panels. "But us? We know better. Sometimes the answer isn't to make it perfect, it's to make it work anyway." As they turned to leave, Varn looked back one final time. The hull still bore the patchwork scars of its origins. But to him, it had never looked more complete. The Accord had handed them broken things, believing it would hold humanity back. But what it really did was give Earth the chance to prove it never needed someone else's path to reach the stars. It just needed a pile of pieces, and the courage to build something no one had ever dared before. The legacy of Nova's Edge wasn't defiance. It was inspiration, proof that real progress doesn't come from following rules. It comes from rewriting them. If this story stirred something in you, if you believe the underestimated still have a shot at greatness, then hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more tales where the impossible becomes inevitable. Because out here in the stars, the story of humanity is just getting started.